You'd think after losing the vote in front of half the neighborhood, Brenda would retreat quietly into a cave made of expired HOA forms and simmering resentment. But no. Like every great villain in a suburban epic, she had one final move. One last, desperate attempt to stop Frank and his rolling monument to petty freedom. It came during the biggest snowstorm of the season. Reports called it the blizzard of the decade. Winds howling, snow piling up like marshmallows in a hot cocoa commercial directed by Quentin Tarantino. Perfect weather for the compliance to do what it was born, nay, engineered to do. At 4:30 a.m., Frank pulled on his boots, zipped his coat, and stepped outside. Snowflakes whirled like confetti at a villain's retirement party. He lifted the tarp. The compliance sat there, majestic, coated in snow like a frosted tank of justice. Engine on, lights blazed, the hydraulic snow cannon screamed to life. But before Frank could even lower the auger, a figure emerged from the blizzard, dramatic, hooded, armed with paperwork. Brenda. She held a clipboard wrapped in plastic to protect it from snow, because of course she did, and attached to it was a new document. "Frank," she yelled over the wind, "I've contacted the County Roads and Transportation Board. This machine is unauthorized on public streets under county statute. If you drive it today, I'll have the sheriff shut this whole thing down." Frank looked at her, then at the snow-covered street, then at the cluster of neighbors gathering behind their curtains like it was pay-per-view TV. And he did the most Frank thing possible. He smiled. "I'm not clearing the street today, just the driveways, starting with Mrs. Henderson's." Brenda blinked. That still counts. But it didn't, because Frank, being the petty Einstein he is, had already checked. Driveways are considered private property. County rules didn't apply. No plow laws, no road regulations, just pure, unregulated justice. He fired up the Zamboni. The compliance moved forward, blade lowered. Snow flew in glorious white arcs. Every driveway it touched became a perfect black runway. Mrs. Henderson watched from her window, clutching her tea like she was witnessing the rebirth of America. Neighbors came outside, some helped shovel sidewalks, others clapped when Frank passed. Someone played Eye of the Tiger from a Bluetooth speaker. Brenda stood frozen, watching her final plan crumble faster than her gluten-free holiday cookies. No fines left, no bylaws, no votes, no legal threats, just defeat and a very clean driveway. By sunrise, Frank had cleared the block, parked his truck in his usual flawless spot, steam rising from the compliance like a conquering warhorse. He raised his coffee mug to his neighbors and to Brenda. And she did something no one expected. She walked over, looked at him, looked at the Zamboni, sighed. "My driveway next," she muttered. Frank nodded. No triumph, no gloating, just a man, his machine, and a neighborhood finally understanding one thing. A clear street is better than a Cold War. And that's the story. Now here's your CTA. If you love this wild tale of icy vengeance, HOA drama, and one man's refusal to let Winter and Brenda win, then don't just scroll away. Hit that like button faster than the compliance clears a driveway. Subscribe for more true HOA war stories. They only get crazier from here. Drop a comment. What would you do if your HOA banned street parking? Would you buy a Zamboni or a tank? Because in this neighborhood, Winter isn't coming. It's already parked in Frank's driveway. Brenda believed in three things: bylaws, laminated paper, and her ability to rally a neighborhood with sheer passive-aggressive determination. Which is why, after national embarrassment, police humiliation, and 3 denied fines, she went for the nuclear option, a formal HOA vote to ban Frank Zamboni forever. She scheduled an emergency community meeting at the clubhouse. Flyers were taped to mailboxes. Emails were sent with subject lines like, "Urgent, neighborhood safety and decorum at risk." Cookies and lukewarm coffee were offered as if carbohydrates could soften the blow of tyranny. Frank showed up, not as a rebel this time, but calm, composed, binder in hand, wearing a sweatshirt that said, "I clear snow, not laws." The room was full. Some came for drama, some came for justice, some came because there were rumors someone brought chili. Brenda stood at the front, next to a PowerPoint titled, "Why Ice Resurfacing Machines Threaten Our Community." Slide 1, a picture of the compliance with flames photoshopped behind it. Slide 2, a list of risks like noise pollution, property value damage, potential hockey games breaking out in a cul-de-sac. Frank sat quietly, sipping coffee. Then came the vote announcement. Proposal 14B, ban the operation and storage of non-traditional snow equipment, specifically ice resurfacers, on HOA property. Brenda expected applause. Instead, Dave stood up. Dave, the quiet neighbor with Viking energy and a degree in software engineering, cleared his throat. "Before we vote," he said, "I think it's fair if the person affected gets to speak." Brenda froze. The room turned to Frank. Frank walked to the front with the confidence of a man backed by legal precedent, caffeine, and the internet. He didn't yell, he didn't mock, he just spoke the truth. "I'm not trying to start a war," he said. "I'm trying to park my truck. The streets are safer because I clear them. Sidewalks are usable. Kids can get to the bus stop. Mrs. Henderson hasn't slipped once this winter. If that's against the rules, maybe the rules need fixing, not the Zamboni." Silence. Then applause. Real applause from real people who were tired of slipping on ice. Brenda turned red, then purple, possibly plaid. Time for the vote. Ballots were passed out. Checkboxes: ban the Zamboni or keep the Zamboni. 10 minutes later, the results were counted. Keep the Zamboni, 32 votes. Ban the Zamboni, 6 votes, including Brenda's laminated one. One vote said, "Make it HOA president." And that was it. Brenda's motion failed. The Zamboni was officially allowed by democratic roll of the neighborhood. Somewhere, an eagle screeched, or maybe that was Dave. But legends don't end when the crowd cheers. They end when the final boss makes one last desperate move. And Brenda wasn't out of moves yet. Because just when peace seemed possible, Brenda made one last attempt to stop Frank, and this final twist turned a neighborhood feud into a legacy.
If there's one thing Brenda believes more than bylaws and laminated clipboards, it's that the ultimate power in the suburbs is calling the police on someone who's mildly inconveniencing you. So one frosty morning, after a night of heavy snowfall and heavier resentment, she made the call. At 6:47 a.m., while Frank was midway through another majestic snow-clearing run with compliance, 2 police cruisers pulled into the neighborhood. Lights on, sirens off. Very, we don't know what we're walking into, but it sounds hilarious at dispatch. Neighbors gathered at windows like it was the season finale of their favorite drama, Keeping Up with the Covenants. Brenda emerged from her house in a robe and fury, pointing at Frank like a prosecutor in a Netflix documentary. There, that machine. He's violating HOA codes, endangering public safety, and creating a menace to the neighborhood. Frank saw the flashing lights, cut the engine, and did the most dramatic thing possible. He stepped off the Zamboni in slow motion, holding a travel mug of coffee like he was stepping off a private jet. The officers approached, trying very hard not to laugh. Officer Ramirez, mid-40s, calm, clearly had seen weirder things, asked, "Sir, is this a Zamboni?" Frank nodded. "Modified for snow removal, fully registered as a specialty vehicle. Title's inside if you'd like to see it." Brenda scoffed so hard she nearly sprained something. "It doesn't matter. He can't operate that." Officer Ramirez held up a hand. "Ma'am, we'll handle it." Officer Patel walked around the compliance, inspecting it like it was a creature from a winter-themed Jurassic Park. He read the license plate, he inspected the city-issued orange safety beacon, he even noticed the laminated copy of city snow removal ordinances taped neatly to the dashboard. Frank was prepared. Over-prepared. "So, Ramirez said, turning to Brenda. What exact law is being broken here? Brenda went full dramatic Broadway performance. He is operating industrial machinery. It's noisy, it's dangerous, it's against HOA guidelines. Ramirez nodded slowly. Ma'am, HOA guidelines aren't enforceable by police unless a city or state law is being broken. Frank, sipping his coffee, added helpfully, Would you like to see the paperwork? Patel nodded. Brenda looked like she swallowed a stapler. Frank retrieved a folder thicker than a preschooler's booster seat. Registration, insurance, snow removal exemption laws, even a letter from old Mrs. Henderson across the street thanking him for clearing her sidewalk. The officers took 3 minutes to review it. Then Ramirez did the unthinkable. He smiled. Well, sir, looks like you're good to go. Patel added, Actually, you missed a patch in front of lot 32. Brenda almost fainted. Frank climbed back onto the Zamboni, fired it up. Air horns sang the song of petty victory. Snow blasted. Neighbors cheered silently from behind blinds like rebels supporting a resistance leader. Police stepped aside and let the Zamboni roll. Brenda retreated. No ticket, no arrest, just pure, unfiltered defeat. But legends don't end here, because after surviving legal threats, fines, and the police, Frank Zamboni didn't just clear snow. It started attracting attention far beyond the cul-de-sac, including the news. If Petty Genius had a championship league, this is the moment Frank would have been drafted first round. Brenda wasn't done, not by a long shot. After 3 failed fines, multiple denied violations, and 1 too many glimpses of Frank's smugly legal parking spot, she summoned the HOA's final form, a lawyer. The letter arrived via certified mail, sealed like it was evidence from a crime scene. The cease and desist was thick enough to use as a doorstop. It accused Frank of operating industrial machinery without authorization, disrupting community peace, creating a public safety hazard, and, my personal favorite, willful mockery of HOA standards. It demanded he immediately stop operating the ice grooming apparatus. No Zamboni, no snow clearing, no fun. But while Brenda expected panic, Frank responded the only way a legend does, by doing the exact opposite, but legally. The next snowfall, before sunrise, Frank suited up, stepped outside, and didn't just clear his spot. He cleared 3 houses in both directions, then the sidewalk, then the cul-de-sac. For over an hour, the compliance roared through the storm like a mythological snow dragon. Classical music blasted from Bluetooth speakers, Vivaldi's Winter, because of course it did. Snow vaporized from the pavement. Neighbors peeked out their windows whispering, "Is this legal?" and "Is that beautiful?" When he was done, Frank parked his truck in his usual immaculate snow-free rectangle, poured himself coffee, and sat down to write a letter. Not a rant, not a refusal. Something far more dangerous. Polite compliance. His letter to the lawyer began with, "Dear Mr. Slimington, thank you for your concern for public safety." Then he explained. He was no longer just clearing his own parking space. He was providing essential snow and sidewalk clearing for elderly residents and kids walking to the bus stop. His vehicle was equipped with an amber safety beacon installed last weekend with Dave, making it technically a public service vehicle. His actions were improving community accessibility, not hindering it. He ended with, "Sincerely, Frank Miller, concerned resident and snow safety volunteer." It was a masterclass in malicious compliance. He didn't break a single rule. In fact, he was following them so aggressively the HOA couldn't keep up. The result? Silence. The lawyer disappeared back into his cave of billable hours. Brenda, she was seen storming around the neighborhood, coffee in hand, eyes blazing, muttering about loopholes and the downfall of civilization. Meanwhile, the neighborhood started choosing sides even louder. People left baked goods at Frank's door. Someone knitted a tiny scarf for the Zamboni steering wheel. Dave composed a theme song. It was 80% electric guitar, 20% dramatic wolf howls. But Brenda was not finished. She only had one weapon left, the nuclear option in HOA warfare. She called the police. Because what happens when two squad cars roll up to a Zamboni at dawn during a blizzard, and the officers have to decide whose side to take? Things get legendary. You'd think seeing a fully legal, snow-free parking spot created by a propane-powered ice titan would earn at least a grudging nod of respect from the HOA. But no, Brenda didn't see innovation. She saw blasphemy. And she responded the only way HOA presidents know how, with laminated rage. By noon on day one of Zamboni Justice, a brand new violation was tucked under Frank's windshield wiper, laminated naturally. Unauthorized operation of industrial equipment on public roadway. Fine, $75. Tone, salty. Frank smiled like a man who had already planned for this. He walked into his home office, opened the In Case of HOA Meltdown binder, and went straight to Section 8C of the City Code. Highlighted, bookmarked, weaponized. It read, City-approved snow removal equipment is permitted to operate within residential streets for purposes of public safety. He wrote his appeal like a polite slap in letter form. My vehicle is being used for snow removal as allowed under City Code. No damage to public or private property. Also, you're welcome for the clearest street in the neighborhood. He printed it, sealed it, and placed it in Brenda's mailbox like a peace treaty, dipped in sarcasm. Brenda's response? Escalation. Fine number 2, noise violation, operation of machinery before 7 a.m. Frank flipped to Ordinance 114B, subsection D. Snow removal equipment is exempt from standard municipal noise restrictions. Another appeal, another checkmate. Fine number 3, improper storage of a commercial vehicle. Now this one nearly got him, until Frank remembered a magical conversation at the DMV. The clerk didn't know how to register a Zamboni. After 30 minutes of confusion and radio calls to a supervisor, they had labeled it as a specialty recreational vehicle, legally the same as a dune buggy or RV. He photocopied the title and attached it with the smile. Appeal accepted. Another laminated L for Brenda. At this point, the neighborhood began choosing sides. On one end, you had the Franktians, silent supporters who waved, offered coffee, and left 6 packs of beer on his doorstep like tribute. On the other, you had the Brendagade, a group of loyal rule lovers who wrote angry Facebook posts in all caps. This is a neighborhood, not a hockey arena. What if a child gets Zambonied? Flame decals are not community-approved colors. Frank responded only with legal documents and beautifully clear asphalt. But even with appeals flying and engines roaring, Brenda was nowhere near surrender. You could practically hear the gears turning in her head. If fines didn't work, she'd need backup. By late January, she found it. A lawyer. A smug, briefcase-carrying HOA attorney who wrote a cease and desist filled with words like public nuisance, reckless endangerment, and we will pursue legal remedy. Most people would panic. Frank brewed more coffee. Because if you think Brenda's lawyer was the final boss, wait until you see how Frank responds with kindness, snow removal for the entire block, and a plan so petty it becomes heroic. There are 2 kinds of people on the night before the first winter storm. the ones who cozy up with hot cocoa, and the ones who stand at their window like Batman, waiting for chaos. Frank was absolutely the second kind. Weather reports were dramatic. 6 to 8 inches overnight, strong winds, hazardous conditions, which in HOA terms translates to Brenda's Christmas came early. She sent out a neighborhood-wide email at 8 p.m. reminding everyone, again, that all cars must be off the street by 9 p.m., regardless of weather conditions. Lamination level, high. Passive aggressiveness level, nuclear. But what Brenda didn't know was that in Frank's driveway, under that huge silver tarp, sat the most unnecessarily brilliant response to tyranny: the compliance, modified, fueled, hungry for ice. At 4 a.m., the neighborhood was silent. Snow blanketed everything like a peaceful Hallmark movie setting, until Frank stepped outside with a travel mug, lifted the tarp, and turned that movie into an action film. Key in. Engine roars to life. The propane-fueled beast growls like a polar bear coughing up diesel. The LED floodlights fire on, lighting up his house, the street, 3 neighboring galaxies. The snowblower spins up with the sound of a jet engine chewing gravel. Frank smiles. It's showtime. He lowers the front auger, engages the gears, and the compliance glides down his driveway like a majestic ice buffalo. Snow explodes from the chute in a glorious plume, landing in his yard like white napalm. 2 passes, just 2, and suddenly, there it is. A perfect black rectangle of bare asphalt, 20 feet long, 8 feet wide, not a snowflake in sight. Frank drives his F-150 into that parking spot like it's planting a flag on the moon. Legally parked, 0 snow, 0 obstruction, maximum spite. At 6:30 a.m., the neighborhood wakes up. Dave emerges in a bathrobe, coffee in hand. He sees the perfectly cleared spot, the monstrous machine in the driveway, Frank inside the house sipping coffee like a general. He just starts slow clapping. Respect level, astronomical. By 9 a.m., Brenda sees it too. She peeks through her curtains like she's spotting Bigfoot. Her face goes through all 5 stages of grief, especially anger. By noon, Frank's windshield has a laminated violation on it. Violation: unauthorized operation of industrial machinery. Frank doesn't even flinch. He walks to his desk, pulls out a binder thicker than a phone book, city ordinances, state motor vehicle codes, HOA bylaws, all highlighted, tabbed, weaponized. He writes a response that's polite, professional, and dripping with legal dominance. He drops it in Brenda's mailbox like a mic. The war has officially begun. Because if you think Brenda's gonna let that slide, think again. Next comes more fines, more loopholes, and a level of petty creativity that could power the national grid. Owning a Zamboni is one thing. Turning it into a snow-obliterating symbol of suburban rebellion? That takes a special kind of madness. The kind of madness Frank absolutely had. And luckily, he found someone who shared it. Gus. Gus didn't work at a dealership, a garage, or anywhere corporate. Gus worked at Gus's Farm and Fleet Repair, a barn-like shop that looked like it hadn't passed any kind of safety inspection since the Nixon administration. The sign on the door said, "If it has an engine and it's broken, I'll fix it. No computers." Frank knew this was his guy. He calls Gus. "Hi, my name's Frank. I need to modify an Olympia ice resurfacer to clear snow from my street so I can legally park in front of my house without violating HOA bylaws." Silence. A tool clanks in the background. Then Gus bursts out laughing like a man who has seen some things and just found a new favorite. "Bring coffee and the machine by tomorrow," he says. "And don't tell me why this is a bad idea. I already know." What followed was the most patriotic, ridiculous, heavy metal montage in HOA warfare history. Every day after work, Frank and Gus stood in freezing air inside the workshop, welding, hammering, fabricating like 2 mad inventors trying to save the world, one driveway at a time. Step 1, weaponizing the front end.
They bolted a massive airport-grade industrial snowblower onto the front. It looked like someone glued a jet engine to a bread truck. Gus engineered a hydraulic system to power it. Frank suggested flamethrowers. Gus said, let's avoid prison. Compromise. Step 2, visibility and drama. They added LED floodlights, bright enough to tan a moose at 40 yards. For safety, Gus winked. Then came the air horn, a cast-off from a semi-truck. When Frank tested it, 3 pigeons evacuated the county. Step 3, aesthetic terror. They painted it midnight blue with flaming decals licking the sides like a NASCAR fever dream. On the front, Gus stenciled a name in bold military letters. The Compliance. Because nothing terrifies an HOA more than someone following the rules too perfectly. 3 weeks in, the machine was reborn. No longer a humble rink polisher, it was a snow-shredding, law-abiding, HOA fine-proof tank of justice. Frank stood back, eyes watering, not from emotion but from paint fumes, and whispered, "Brenda's not ready for this." Neighbors began to notice. Cars slowed down in front of Frank's house. One kid asked if he was starting a Winter Olympics team. Even Dave next door, introverted software engineer, beard like a Viking, finally came over and whispered the words every petty hero deserves to hear. "Dude, I want in." Frank grinned. Gus revved the engine. The machine coughed like a bear waking up from hibernation. Snow season was coming, and so was revenge. Because building a monster is one thing, but unleashing it during the first snowfall, that's when legends are born. Neighbors start filming, and the HOA starts trembling.
Some people cope with HOA stress by journaling. Others meditate. Frank? He opened Craigslist at 2:14 a.m. with a mug of coffee, a grudge the size of Ohio, and the words, "Used snow removal machinery, cheap but dramatic," typed into the search bar. And that's when destiny appeared. Listing title, 1998 Olympia ice-resurfacer. Runs good, needs blade. In simpler terms, a Zamboni, the machine they use to make hockey rinks smooth enough for professional athletes and grown men who still believe they'll get drafted by the NHL someday. Most people would scroll past it. Frank stared at it like it was Excalibur sticking out of a snowbank. Why a Zamboni? Simple. The HOA banned street parking to keep snow off the road. But if Frank could personally make his 20 feet of curbside road clearer than a hospital hallway, even during a blizzard, then technically he wouldn't be violating the purpose of the bylaw. And as we all know, nothing enrages an HOA more than someone following the rules harder than the rules intended. He shows the listing to his wife, Sarah. She looks at it, looks at him, takes a long, dramatic sip of wine, and says, "You're kidding." Frank doesn't blink. "I've never been more serious in my life." Silence. Then she snorts, then laughs, like full-on ugly laugh with tears, and finally the words that launched 1,000 horsepower. "Fine, do it. I want to see how this ends." So he calls the seller. The man's name is Jock, a retired rink manager in a warehouse that smells like diesel fuel and broken dreams. He speaks like he's fought polar bears. "You want it for driveway?" he asks suspiciously. "No," Frank says proudly. "I want it for war." The next day, Frank drives 3 hours, rents a flatbed trailer bigger than his mortgage, and meets his noble steed, a faded blue and white Zamboni the size of a compact tank. Jock teaches him how to start it, steer it, not crash it into a wall. Blade dull, but heart strong. They shake hands like knights exchanging a dragon. Then comes the hardest part, getting it home without flipping it, getting arrested, or ending up on a viral fail compilation. 2 sketchy wooden ramps, a borrowed pickup, 3 French curse words, and a prayer later, the Zamboni is strapped onto the trailer like a suburban Trojan horse.
Frank drives home with white knuckles, imagining headlines like, "Local man causes multi-car pileup with ice rink machine." But somehow, he makes it, backs it into his driveway at midnight, throws a tarp over it like he's hiding a woolly mammoth. The neighbors see the silhouette and immediately start Googling, "Is my neighbor building a hockey arena?" But Frank isn't done. The machine works, but it's not ready for combat. He needs upgrades. He needs power. He needs a man named Gus. Because if buying a Zamboni was Act 1, turning it into a snow-destroying, HOA-obliterating war machine is Act 2. And wait until you meet the mechanic who says yes to all of it.
You ever notice how peace in a neighborhood lasts exactly until the HOA finds a new rule to laminate? Everything was calm, snow hadn't even touched the ground yet, and then bam, the homeowner's inbox dings with a message straight from the gates of bureaucratic doom. Effective December 1st to March 31st, no vehicles of any kind shall be parked on neighborhood streets. Violators will be fined, towed, and possibly turned into lawn decor. And yes, it was laminated, because nothing says "we mean business" like plastic-coated tyranny. Frank, regular guy, proud owner of an F-150 and a garage packed with so many tools and half-finished projects it legally qualifies as a museum, reads the notice 3 times. Surely this can't apply if it isn't even snowing, right? Wrong. The HOA added those 4 beautifully villainous words, regardless of weather conditions. Translation: even if the sun is shining, birds are singing, and not a single snowflake has fallen, your truck must be banished from the street like it's a cursed artifact. Now, you have to understand, this wouldn't be a problem if Frank could park in his driveway, except his wife Sarah works night shifts and needs access to the driveway at unpredictable hours. And the garage? That's not a garage. That's a sacred workshop filled with wood scraps he swears he'll use someday, plus a table saw, a drill press, and more extension cords than a rock concert. So the truck lives on the street, has for years, never bothered a soul. But HOA logic isn't based on reason. It's based on because we can. And presiding over the suburban dictatorship? Brenda, HOA president, hair sprayed tighter than the rules she writes, armed with a clipboard, a cold smile, and the unstoppable power of mild condescension. She hands out winter parking notices like Oprah gives away cars. You get a ban. You get a ban. Everyone gets a ban. Frank tries to be rational. "It doesn't even snow that much here," he says. Brenda responds with a smile that says, "Rules first, logic later, happiness never." This is where most people would give up, move their car, and grumble through winter. But Frank isn't most people. Frank looks at his laminated notice, squints like a general reading a battle map, and says the words that spark legends. This means war. He tries diplomacy first, goes to the HOA meeting, presents logical counterpoints like, "What if we just move cars when it actually snows?" But logic bounces off Brenda like marshmallows off a brick wall. The rule stands. And that's when a new idea tiptoes into Frank's mind. A ridiculous, glorious, mechanically insane idea. If the rule says you can't park on a snowy street, what if the street never gets snow on it? What if his parking spot is the cleanest, driest, most snow-free patch of asphalt in the entire zip code? And just like that, the legend of the Zamboni is born. Because if you think the HOA was unreasonable, wait until you see what happens when a man with caffeine, petty motivation, and access to Craigslist looks for heavy machinery at 2 a.m.